Hello and welcome to the New Rochelle Bar Association Oral History Project. My name is Ronald Zezima and I welcome Warren Agatston.
Yes.
I wanted to pronounce it properly.
Thank you.
The interviewee to be interviewed for this program. The date is August 27, 2021, and we are both participating in the recording of this archive. I've agreed to and signed the interviewer's release form dated August 27, 2021, and Warren Agatston has agreed to and signed the interviewee release form. With the formalities completed, let's begin the interview. Good morning, Warren.
Good. Is it still morning? Yes, it is still morning.
Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Okay. Can you give us a little bit of background information about yourself?
Well, I was born in 1937 in Bronxville, New York, and grew up in Eastchester, Tuckahoe area. My dad was a dentist in Tuckahoe, and I have one sister, and went through the local school system in Tuckahoe. It was called Tuckahoe High School and still exists today. Went to Syracuse University as an undergraduate and dual enrolled at Syracuse Law School. So I went ahead 1 year, so I had a 3-year undergraduate, 3-year law school. So unfortunately, the difficulty was, and was probably stupid at the time, because all my electives were first-year law school classes. And if I flunked one first-year law school class, I wouldn't have graduated. So it was a risk, but as it turned out, it worked out fine, because at the time I had a girlfriend. She was 3 years younger than I, and she grew up in Yonkers. So we knew somewhere down the road we were going to get married. She eventually went to Cornell, and then transferred to Syracuse when I was in law school, and we got married my last year of law school. So we moved up our life, and in those days, obviously, I wouldn't have allowed my 3 kids to do anything like that. But fortunately, my parents were very agreeable at that time and trusted us. I guess we were a lot more mature than a lot of children of the 18, 19, 20, 22-year-old today. So that was what I did, and so I went to law school and graduated. But at the time when I was in Syracuse, I also was in the ROTC, so I was required to, I could defer my time in the Army. Once I graduated law school, I had to go. So I went in as a 6-monther, as a first lieutenant, because I had already spent 3 years in the reserves while I was going through law school. But unfortunately, the Cuban Missile Crisis came along, and I was extended for another year. So I spent 1.5 years in the service. I got out of in about 1962, 63. Was then a captain, and came back to New York to start my legal practice at that time.
Okay. Tell us about your first job beyond the military.
My first job, Janice and I, my wife, we were then living with my in-laws, because obviously, living with my in-laws, because I didn't have a job. I got a job with a small law firm in New York City called Rappaport Brothers, and they did a lot of real estate with a lot of big firms in New York, the Durst Brothers, etc., other large firms at that time. And so I got my start in New York and spent about 2.5 years as an associate in that firm. But I then had my first daughter, first child born, and living in Manhattan, working the crazy hours, taking a train home. We now had moved to Hartsdale into an apartment. I found that I never saw my daughter. So I went to work for a law firm in White Plains called Kobach and Chase. They represented the some waterworks companies. They represented a lot of real estate up in upstate New York and in Lower Westchester. So I worked for them for about 3 years in White Plains, and it was nice because I could see my children at that time. And by that time, I had a second child 22 months after the first one, a son.
And was that basically a transactional job, or did you go to court at all?
No, it was mostly transactional. In the New York City job, I did some court work, some tax certiorari court work in the Supreme Court of New York County, but the job in White Plains was mostly transactional type of work.
And which type of job did you like? Did you enjoy going to court or not?
In the city, when I went in the court, the Supreme Court, it was a very different type of practice. Tax certiorari is not, and when you're doing litigation, not against some individual because somebody got hurt or they're suing them. So it was more with administrative type of practice, and it was straightforward and interesting, but not as exciting as maybe certain trial work that I eventually got involved in many years later.
Okay. And when you left the firm in White Plains, where did you go?
I came to New Rochelle. Finally got here. I went in a law firm called Rubin and Rubin. It was made up of 4 Rubins. There was Saul Rubin, who was then he became a judge and city court judge. I don't recall at the time he was. There was his son Steve Rubin, who did mostly matrimonial practice, and I got involved in that with Steve. There was Henry Rubin, a brother, and that was the kind of practice. And we had a very, very local type of practice, and most of my practice was involved with practice of matrimonial with Steve, because that was really what he was involved in, so I got involved in that.
Okay. And where was their office located?
In this building, 271 North, we were, I'm trying to think of, I think we were on the 12th floor. So, and eventually that firm dissolved, the 2 Rubins left, one died, and then the firm grew. We enlarged that firm. We brought in Walter Barbaro, who was a member of this bar association, and he was a partner of mine for many years. There were the Albertson brothers, Tom and Joe. There was 2 Schefflers, Mark Scheffler, and I'm losing my mind. I forgot. It'll come to me. Anyway, Alan Scheffler. So we had a number of members over the years that came and gone, as most law firms do. But it was on the 12th floor. We had about 4 or 5 or 6 partners at any one time.
Okay. And at what point did you become involved with the New Rochelle Bar Association?
Oh, that was probably many years later, since, as I said, I never lived in New Rochelle. And at that time, my practice was rather unique. I represented 2 clients, 2 major clients. One was called North Star Contracting Corp, and they were a heavy construction company. They did the wiring in the original the tower in New York that eventually came down in 9/11. They did heavy construction. They did the upper deck of the Queens Road Bridge. They did a power line from Buffalo to New Rochelle. So there was a varied kind of company, and so my practice was involved with them, and so it wasn't local practice. I also represented a local company called the Rafferty, who built, in the time that I was representative, about 700 diners along the East Coast. So again, in answer to your question, it wasn't something that I got involved in. It probably wasn't until about 20 years ago, maybe, or 25 years ago, that I joined the New Rochelle Bar Association and got somewhat involved, mostly through the CLEs, because that was something, I'm not sure exactly when that was requirement, but it was a requirement to have, I think it was 24 credits every 2 years, something like that. So I got involved in that and went, but didn't know a lot of the members of that. Sandy Sher was a good buddy of mine, so I knew him, and he and I would go and hang out together at the CLEs. But there weren't a lot of local people in New Rochelle that I knew, because I wasn't doing a lot of practice here. On a rare occasion, I'd go to the city court, but usually on an assignment where they'd ask you to come and be assigned to some kind of small matter, and I would go there. And it wasn't until a number of years later that I got involved in doing the arbitration in the small claims court, and I started doing that and being a hearing officer, which I loved. I thought it was great. It was fun. Felt I was a big shot. I'm now a judge. It's kind of fun.
Okay. And eventually you joined the board of directors of the Bar Association.
Yes, I think it was, let's see, somebody dragged me in. I think it was, I can't recall. One of the past presidents dragged me in. But anyway, yeah, I got involved, and I was happy to be part. And what really was fun now is, as I've heard other members, I just heard Julie speak about how warm and friendly the Bar Association was. Well, see, I didn't know most of the local lawyers, so I got to know a lot of the people and became very involved and enjoyed being part of it, not just at a CLE meeting, but as part of the board of directors, and I'll help you make this organization grow.
Okay. And this oral history project is your initiative. This is your idea. You're the person in charge of it. How did you come to develop this, and what made you think that this is something we should do?
Okay, I have to give you a little bit of history. I have been a senior auditor at SUNY Purchase for about 18 years. Once you become 65 under New York State law, seniors over 65 can excuse me, participate in being a senior auditor up to 8 credits a semester. And I have been doing that at SUNY for 17, 18 years, and very interesting, and I'm not going to go into that. It's on a different subject. But one of the professors, 2 of the professors that I had dealt with, were just beginning to do an oral history program of the minorities living mostly in Portchester and in Mamaroneck, the history of how they came into the States, how they were managing their difficulties and issues. So I started helping these 2 professors with this, and I said, oh, this is a great idea. I belong to Temple Israel New Rochelle, which is a congregation that has been as long or as old, maybe a little older, than the New Rochelle Bar Association. I think it started in 1905. And so we have members of long standing and a lot of elderly members that have given a lot to New Rochelle and to the Temple. And I felt that their history should be told. And so with my learned experience that I got from SUNY, I also checked with Columbia University, who has a master's program in this, and did some research, found out that I could do this, and started doing oral histories of initially older members of the congregation, because, and unfortunately, I have done 4 that have subsequently passed. So their children and grandchildren will have a history that maybe they never would have had.
Interesting. Is there anything else that you would like to tell the people who are going to be viewing our oral history project?
Well, I just hope that you look at it carefully. Excuse me. I think it's very worthwhile to understand the Bar Association's history, which is over 100 years old. I plan and hope that during this period of time we will have, and I have accumulated, with Greg Varian's help, many, many newspaper articles going back, I think, as far as 1938, about the Bar Association. And some of these are fascinating stories and names about people that some of us know, some of us maybe don't know or heard about. Old timers in New Rochelle, going back to the days when Susan Kettner's father was practicing here, and Ben Bermelstein, who was a judge in this town, and going back many, many years that I saw or was part of, but as I said, not fully involved because of not living in New Rochelle. I lived in Rybrook for about, I don't know, 47 years, and then just recently moved to Greenwich.
Okay. And Warren, at the age of 84, tell us what you're doing now in your practice and what you hope to accomplish in the next few years?
Well, in my practice is very limited now. I moved my office home. I am associated with a member of this board, Artem Durchik. He has a law firm in White Plains, or a member of a law firm, so I've associated with him since, as living in Connecticut, there's a strange law that says if I live in Connecticut, I have to have physically an office in New York to be able to do what I do here. So I have a few estates that I'm handling, as one as an executor, one as an attorney. Having been my age, obviously, we lose some of our clients, unfortunately. And so that's pretty much what I'm doing today. And then, obviously, as I said, I'm involved with the Bar Association as on the board of directors. I'm involved in my temple, also being a trustee of a temple Israel in Rochelle, and involved in this oral history for the Bar Association and for my temple. So there's enough to keep me busy. Plus, I have 9 grandchildren scattered around the country. I plan to see one of mine who is now in Hamilton in San Francisco, and I plan to go out to see her. So I'm looking forward to that, although I've seen her in Hamilton before the COVID. She was in San Francisco. But now the company Hamilton will be traveling around the country, and she'll be leaving San Francisco and moving on to Boise, Las Vegas, etc. So I'll catch her somewhere. And my other grandchildren, I just enjoy and follow them wherever they are. At Harvard Law School, I have one as a senior, and he's going to be clerking for a Supreme Court judge in Colorado, where he lives, and a bunch of others. So I could go on and on about grandchildren, but I don't think that this is the place to do that.
Okay, Warren, I want to thank you on behalf of the Bar Association for doing this oral history project. This is very important and informative, and I thank you for speaking to us today.
You're welcome. Click stop.